Welcome everybody, this is David Kley of the Orange Design Hexxen Media Group podcast, and I've got the team around me today. We're going to talk a little bit about OpenAI and ChatGBT, and specifically, should you use ChatGBT for SEO? So there's going to be a lot of interesting and conflicting opinions on this. Some that agree, some that disagree. I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody from the team. If you'd like to start.
My name is Maya Garnot, and I am the content director at Orange Design Hexxen Media Group. I work with all these fine folks here, and I wear a lot of different hats. I do everything from content strategy, content writing, editing, but then I also do other stuff like design, social media, different types of digital marketing, and interacting with clients. So I do it all.
I'm Eric Jensen. I am on our SEO team here, and basically what I do is help pages and websites rank.
Hi, I'm Jason Working, SEO content specialist, Orange Design Hexxen Media Group. Work on content, get it ranked, and whatever it takes for our clients.
Okay, so topic of discussion, which is related to content generation or creation, is should you use ChatGBT for SEO? So for people that don't know, ChatGBT is part of OpenAI. It's a massively growing platform where people can go and ask questions. They can ask it to generate content. Pretty crazy piece of kit. And what we've seen in our research is a lot of companies starting to use that for content production. So one of the first things that came to my mind was, well, if it's content production, that's kind of what we do in regards to SEO, right? Whether we're creating articles, FAQs, blog posts. So I would say, given that we have a lot of different, as Maya said, a lot of different hats, we produce a lot of different things, in terms of development, API development, web development, design, etc. I would say 50 to 60% of that is content creation. So, it's definitely entered my mind of should we use this system for SEO, and I have my own opinions on it. But who would like to give one of theirs? Okay, I'll give mine.
Okay.
One of the things that I think we absolutely should use it sparingly and cautiously. And the reason why I would say sparingly is because it hasn't really been used enough yet to say whether it's safe. Sometimes they'll give disclaimers on certain things. It'll say, obviously do your own research. Well, I could have done my own research before coming here. Right, but in terms of like a head start to an article, I think that's important. If you could knock out a paragraph or something like that, or two, just to kind of get something going, or to figure out a different way to say something. I've seen people generate. They'll ask a question, they'll spit out an answer. It says, "Okay, create a title for that," and it'll spit out a title. It says, "No, I need a more clickbaity one." Then spits out a more clickbaity one. It's like, huh. So it's definitely, I think it's very, very clever, but it's also very, very early, and it's one of those things where, when everybody's jumping on the ship, it's kind of like, I'll give an example of like an investing tip from a quote from Warren Buffett. He says, be bold when others are cautious, and cautious when others are bold, right? So if everybody's like ChatGPT, it's like, wait a minute, let's see what this thing is, and how it works, where it pulls its sources from. We have done some research on this, and we can see that they don't have quite the rapport of or indexing power that Google does, which that's a whole other video in itself, is ChatGPT or OpenAI versus Google, right? Surprised that they haven't bought them yet. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, I don't know. But let's go back to the original topic. I've stated a couple of things that I think for should you use this. I can go into a couple more reasons, but I want to get some of your feedback on that.
So I actually asked ChatGPT if we should use it for SEO. And it gave a long answer, but the very first thing it says, after telling us what it is, a powerful language generation model, it said it is not recommended for SEO, as it may not be optimal for SEO purposes. And that talks about, may not be the same quality as what a person can write, that we've already talked about that kind of thing. So because of that answer, and also because of Google warning about using, AI to generate content, I would say no right now. I think, the landscape of what AI chatbots can do, and also Google and other search engine algorithms are going to, I mean, they're already constantly changing. I think they're going to continue to evolve.
I think they have to now.
Right. Well, based on the advances on both sides of that, I think just how everything works is going to change in the future. But like you mentioned, there's some uses for it for maybe some inspiration, or just a starting point, an outline, a title, that kind of thing. I think it'd be interesting to start testing that and using that in controlled environments in certain capacities.
So what you're saying is we have an upcoming blog post on that, right?
Right.
The research and results of that?
Yeah, it would be
For sure.
an interesting case study to look at, comparing, human content versus that and how it performs and that kind of thing. I mean, one of the things that someone had identified is that you can use ChatGPT to tell you what are good keywords or, what are commonly searched terms, that kind of,
Which normally would take a lot of time too. I saw that.
Right, and it takes, but not only the time, but it takes a person, reasoning skills to not just look at the numbers, but also think, does this apply directly? What's the intent behind this term, and does that apply directly to, in our case, what our client is trying to achieve?
And you've heard me mention that, in sales calls too. It's like honing in on that intent. Like, my intent is just to gather information. My intent is to buy. My intent is to hire.
Right.
There's a lot of different ways that, if you're just grabbing and copy and pasting this keyword list from something, it might not be the right intent for whoever your end user is.
Right.
And I do want to throw in there real quick, Google has outright said that they're against it, right? It's against their content guidelines. Any type of AI or generated content is something that they're not going to look kindly upon. I wish they'd give a little bit more details, like, hey, here's an example, because when you look at those, with anything Google, it's always kind of vague, right? It's like, here's this thing we're going to say. It's like describing what the color red is to a blind person. It's like, here's this thing. It's like, okay, well, and the way my mind thinks, I'm like, well, what is color? What's, again, different.
I'm not sure they can detect it to be enough if they want us to believe anything, though.
I would agree with that 100%. I think it's so early. The platforms had such massive growth. I think it's difficult to say, like, how. Now, they've mentioned that they're going to add the watermarks and things in a future date, but as far as I know, that's not in place yet. So people right now, and why the website's overloaded and down all the time, is that everybody's going in there. It's like, hey, this is really great.
But on the other side, I would also say that maybe Google can't, maybe they can't detect it, or they can, but just not to the level they say they can. I'd be willing to bet that if I wrote 400 words and took 400 words from ChatGPT, it would be astronomically different. Meaning, you'd be able to tell which one. I'm not saying that I'm like the world's best writer.
Yes, you are. You're one of them.
Thank you.
That's for sure.
But what I'm saying, the point being is, there's a human element to everything. But particularly in this instance, where you might not be able to just, like you were saying, cut and dry, copy and paste whatever ChatGPT cranks out, nor can Google sit there and say, well, I can tell the difference between those two from an indexing standpoint, to the level that maybe they can't. But I think, and it goes to the question, should we use it, or should anyone use it? I don't think it's there. I honestly don't, and that doesn't mean that it won't be, or Google won't buy it, or
Well, Maya brought up a really good point. This kind of goes along with what you were talking about, is that you can potentially save time and therefore charge the clients less. Because manual process is such a huge. I don't think anybody on that side of things really understands how much time goes into proper content creation, the research phase, weeding out all the BS, and trying to, and also finding the client's tone, right? Because ChatGPT, we work with a number of clients who want things set a certain way, it has to be in this type of structure, and I don't think it would be able to do that. But to what you were saying, and kind of combining the two viewpoints between the two of you, I guess I would play devil's advocate and say, well, what if you took those 400 words and your 400 words and combine them together, is that unique enough to where it saved you the equal amount of time to create 400 more?
Absolutely.
Right. So go ahead.
I mean, writer's block is an actual thing, especially if you're writing about car accidents for the 80th time. And so it might be that this
Or the 100th.
Yeah, right. That goes
Yeah.
to my point.
So if they're pulling from whatever they're pulling from, then you have this pretty bland, possibly repetitive text that isn't what a human would do. But okay, and then you just go in and you change it and put a human touch on it.
I think for the statistics, like if you're citing things that are factual that I guess don't require that human articulation, right? So it's like, you know, how many, like for the legal industry, like what we were just talking about briefly, you know, how many car accidents were there in Missouri in 2021? Okay, well it can spit that out, right?
And I have seen that it does mention its sources when you ask it that kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because that was what we were talking about earlier, is the questionability of where did this come from, right? So I think there's a definite on the research side of things where it frightens me from just a raw creation standpoint is, you know, things that I mentioned, find the right tone, also optimizing the content, right? Because the way that Google works and where we're trying to get a lot of these people ranking, you know, ChatGPT will answer the question. But where Google, you have to write for SEO, which I think is honestly one of the weaker points of something. So there was an example that I was learning about earlier when someone else was reviewing this, and they said, you know, if you just type in something simple like how many calories are there in an apple, right? And on one side, ChatGPT just spit out, hey, it's 95 calories, but Google wouldn't rank that. So the issue is, it's like, okay, I think for things like that, for the basic, you know, either statistical or I just need to find a direct answer to something, that can save you a ton of time, because on the Google side, if I type in, you know, how many calories are there in an apple, I've got ads trying to sell me nutritional products.
We can also talk into our phone.
100%. Yeah.
And get that.
Yeah.
So
and I'm sure there's going to be like a really advanced. And let me just finish this part real
Yeah.
quick. So it's like, so I've got these ads that are, you know, top and bottom. Maybe if it's a local type of search, excuse me. Now you've got the local pack that's being added to that. But let's say you click those first couple results in Google, there's probably going to be 300 to 400 words before you even find out the doggone answer. Right now with rich snippets, it's getting better. You know, I think Google has their own unique technology that they're trying to evolve. I mean, rich snippet is basically the Google version, I think, of ChatGPT in some ways. But it's a totally different writing process. And when I've tried to find information on a number of things, whether it be product-based or, you know, just general information, you don't really get the answer till later in the article, right? It's usually halfway down or it's down towards the bottom. It's like, well, I just need to know how many calories are dug on apple, right? I think in things like that, and definitely for statistics, as long as they have their sources to where you can say, is this real? Because who's really holding the keys for this? You know, I won't get the conspiratorial thing, but it's like, you know, I don't want to quote Elon Musk because everybody has their own feelings about him, but he said, you know, it depends who's holding the keys, right? Who's holding the keys and who's writing the code, right? Because as we've seen with God anything across the internet, whether it be an opinion or political or whatever, everybody always has their unique spin on it. So I feel like as long as it's pulling facts that are irrefutable and can be researched on major publications to be true, I think those are safe to use. But when you start to ask it its opinions, it's basically going to crawl all those opinions and try to formulate it the best it can into one.
Actually, if you ask it what its opinion is, it'll tell you that I'm not capable of having.
Right. Yeah.
Here's some
Well,
information.
that's why it starts by saying don't ask it for advice, and then it's not a self-aware you know, intelligence with a conscience. It's just pulling information. But I asked it for sources on a factual piece of information, and it said it doesn't have personal experience or sources to provide. And it just says, you know, it's
most internet
pulled.
companies.
Yeah, right.
But on the point that you were on, Dave, about you know, in order for something to rank on Google, it has to be this. I mean, this isn't necessarily always the case, but SEO has made it so that, you know, most content out there that is optimized is like this big long thing that doesn't get directly to the point, and that is not always helpful for users. But I think that's more speaks to the problem that search engines, not just Google, we say Google, but and that is.
I think it's fair to say Google for the most part, because what do they have, like 96% of it? It's pretty outrageous at this point. But I do agree with you. People are experimenting with other ones.
It's actually, I saw a statistic, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think there was a certain one that was growing quite a bit, and Google was actually going down.
Why don't you ask ChatGPT which one's going? Let's see what its answer is.
Right.
I think it's, not to cut you off, I just think it's really a fascinating technology, but I think that it has to be used like any powerful thing. Remember that old Spider-Man quote? With great power comes great responsibility. It's like, if we're taking this thing and we're going to use it, we have to use it carefully, because most of the time, I think it's fair to say it won't state its sources. It's just going to say, here's the answer, right? And maybe as time goes on, that gets better, but I feel like the more sources and things, the more stuff you have to crawl through to verify or that it has to present, it's kind of getting further away from its purpose. But you're taking away the simplicity.
Right. And also the whole point is that they're crawling multiple sources and then compiling that into one answer. So like we were talking about before with how it would cite its sources and how a user would use that, there could potentially be 100 links for one piece of information just to all verify one, piece of common knowledge. Mm-hmm. So I think that is a challenge. But yeah, I think the whole issue is more with how search engines and their algorithms have evolved. So maybe with this kind of technology, if it's used more and more, maybe the algorithms will change and evolve to be more direct and exact answer oriented over, having this. Well, keyword stuffing used to be a thing. It used to be in order. All you have to do to rank high. All you have to do
stuff being done on websites.
Right. All you have to do is say this word as many times as you can in all these different places, and
then they invented the keyword to content ratio algorithm change.
Right, and not only that, just all the different changes of having content that is more user-based and not just solely based on these ranking elements, but that's always going to be a factor, where our job is to make sure that those elements that they rank on are optimized and in place correctly. And that's the whole point of, doing SEO, so that you rank well based on the information that we know about how things rank. But yeah, I wonder if it will change over time to compete basically with things like ChatGPT.
Do you have any concerns over ChatGBT growing self-aware?
No.
Are we looking at like some Terminator levels of I know all the answers, you know nothing?
Well, this technology is not self-aware, but I mean that is a thing. With Google, Lambda is a language algorithm, but the person that was working on it did feel that, based on what they know, that it is self-aware. And I mean, what you're talking about is like the singularity where machines become more capable and smarter than humans have the ability to do. And then at that point, we don't have control over the world. We're at the mercy of machines, basically. But that's a glib way of saying it and looking at it. But it could be that we exist in harmony and we, are maybe we're better off being controlled by machines. Like,
I like Asimov's take on it, where eventually life became so easy for us that the robots realized it was a bad thing that they existed.
And then they just
then they created a universe where robots never existed.
Well,
I think that's more likely than taking it.
Because they don't have personal stake in it, because they're machines. They're not clouded by the personal feelings of a human.
There's no. They don't have like. There's no free will.
Right.
Well, Neil deGrasse Tyson was saying that if we become like pets, basically, to this super intelligence, he was saying like, look at how we treat our pets pretty well. We worship them, we go home to them, make sure that they're fed and cared for and everything.
We walk over them. this person.
Right.
Yeah.
So-
Uncle Neil. Yeah, that dude. Yeah.
So maybe it wouldn't be such a
There's
problem.
a quote that comes to mind. It says, that human beings. Let me try to remember it without screwing it all up. Human beings are very bad at mitigation and very good at adaptation. So, and you see that in a lot of things. I mean, you go into a million different things, including climate change and everything else. But it's like, if this is something, what's also ironic with this, ChatGPT would have been created by people. So let's hope they got the keys locked down. Anyway, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent from this. So I guess the answer to the question of, should you use ChatGPT and OpenAI for SEO is, it depends. It depends on, how you plan to use it. Does it need to be, accurate to the nth degree?
The
It's
ranks
still-
you don't get penalized.
Well, I think that's the overarching
Right,
theme
yeah.
here, but I don't want us, full disclosure, we're not using it yet. I want us to really see how that all plans out. I don't want to be behind on the curve, but also I don't think that Google is going to treat that well if you're asking the same thing over and over and getting very similar results. I mean, they've already got so many things out there in terms of duplication penalties that are always getting better, and I would be shocked if they're not aware of how this thing works to some degree, how it's generating content, what that content looks like. I mean, again, we bring up the watermark thing a lot, or certain sentence structures, or how they're going to implement that. There's not going to be as much value in just people reading the same thing. Like if you go to the front page of Google, there's those 10 organic results. They all say the same thing, but differently. Like it's a different audience, it's a different answer, it's a different take, but they're all on the same topic. Whereas with ChatGPT, I mean, I think you can get different answers from that, but ultimately it's all going to be the same answer, right? You change one word, and does it really change everything? Whereas in Google, it can.
Right.
I mean, I think that's less of a concern for me, because you can ask it, we already know you can ask it to give you one answer or essay or blog or whatever, and then ask it to write it a different way or with a different voice, or, so I think, and with it generating on the fly, it's not like I don't think it's then pulling from, someone else already asked me this question, I already gave it an answer, so I'm going to use the same answer. I would be less concerned about that because, I mean, already, as you mentioned, and as we know from our work, everything out there is basically saying something that's already been said a different way to an extent, especially for, commercial or marketing purposes when we're doing content for plumbers and HVAC and retail and law firms and, things like that. There's going to be common types of information based on those, keyword volumes that we target for our clients, because we know that people want to know about them and want to get, a quick, good answer. But you can only say something so many different ways. I mean, we as writers can always be creative and, but if we're limited by a certain voice or set of rules because of, how the client wants to present themselves, and then we're talking about the same things, as especially in a competitive field where where our clients' competitors are all using SEO agencies as well, and they know all the tips and tricks and are targeting those same topics and keywords. I think our content is going to be, that the content that's out there written by humans is still to an extent just a reiteration of what someone else said. So I would be less concerned about that as far as using this chatbot for SEO purposes than I would for just, I guess, overall quality.
That makes sense. All right, everyone, well, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel. Anyway, no, I think that covered it. I think that's really good. So thank you, everybody, for participating today. And we're going to be exploring this definitely in the future. Stay tuned for a bunch of case studies, a couple different comparison results. It's going to be an exciting thing to take a look at.